Morning, morning, monsters. I have a bit of a strange one for us today. Life on the moon. So, I was going through a bunch of stories of science achievements and science failures that had happened in 2019, and most of them I had recognized, but there were two that jumped out at me. I'll speak about the second one another time, but the first one is life on the moon. So we're going to go back, wind the clock back. This all starts when there was a mission to crash a probe into the moon. It was hotly debated for a very long time, and they eventually said, fuck it. And they they built this probe, and this probe's purpose was to ram the moon as hard as it could, cause an explosive crater, and for them to analyze the explosion, and from the explosion get a whole bunch of details about the moon. This did a few things, but one of the things it did was discover that there is water on the moon, a lot more water than we thought. There are a bunch of other interesting materials on the moon as well. And this stimulated more interest in going to the moon for mining and for staging for space. And one of the things this generated, other than some NASA projects, is the Google Lunar X Prize. And the Google Lunar X Prize, so there's been several X Prizes or X Prize stuff competitions. They're very interesting actually to talk about and go into depth on. I'd love to talk about the AC/DC one sometime, the Transformer. But this one was to get a lander to the moon and have a little robotic drive around the moon. It doesn't sound that hard, but it actually really is, because, people don't realize a lot of going to the moon was just throwing money at it and brute forcing it last time we did it. So Google's Lunar X Prize was basically about trying to bring down the cost of going to the moon and roving the moon, and also just to sort of stimulate interest. But as I say, it had been kicked off because now we believe there's a lot of commercial reasons and space staging reasons to go to the moon. And of the various private commercial enterprises to pursue the Lunar X Prize, Israel was one of the countries to decide to go after it. And they started building a project to do this. I believe their agency is called SpaceIL or something. And they failed to get the SpaceX prize. I believe actually no one. Yeah, the original deadline was end of 2014, and no team actually got the SpaceX prize in the end. But the Space Israel team, which failed, but they were the closest to succeeding, got the Moonshot Award, which was a smaller amount, but it was in recognition of their efforts. So basically, Space Israel builds this lander, decides, okay, we're gonna fly this lander up, and we're gonna try land on the moon. But turns out landing on the moon is quite hard, and they smash into the moon. Okay, failure. But Google says, here's the Lunar X Prize moonshot thing, as in, like, we need to acknowledge you as a team because we pretty much know no one else is going to get this because the cost of failure is so freaking high. And what we wanted to do was stimulate the industry, and we've done that. But the story doesn't end there. So typically whenever you have a lander or a mission to space, humans are arrogant fucks, and we load up our spacecraft with copies of various texts and DNA, and it's all kind of funny actually. There's so many good science fiction stories that basically start, an alien found this probe that humans sent into Earth that had our DNA on, and they engineered a virus, or they found the exact coordinates to Earth and then they come to invade. A bit pessimistic in my view, but it is kind of hilarious how whenever we send something into the universe, we're like, okay, everyone sign it now, and let's just shove all of humanity on. So it's very typical golden record style to send up copies of encyclopedias, Wikipedia, religious text. They sent up the Quran, they sent up the... Yeah, so they sent up Wikipedia, a Rosetta Disk, a Planix database, the Torah, children's drawings, memoirs of Holocaust survivors, national anthem, the Israeli flag, the Israeli Declaration of Independence, all this kind of stuff. And they usually do like multiple formats, and there's actually a whole branch of science about trying to craft a message for space. Well, what does this have to do with life on the moon? Well, remember how I just said they discovered that the moon has more water, and that kicked off the whole debate? Well, it turns out there is first of all, there is a treaty. It's the Outer Space Treaty. It's from the 1960s, I believe, 1967. The Outer Space Treaty says many things about military and space, which, by the way, the US is breaking now, and the militarization of space is a whole thing that's becoming, spy satellites in space and all that stuff, and I'm pretty sure there's kinetic weapons in some satellites, but hey, whatever. Kinetic weapons are literally could be as simple as drop a rod, but it gets interesting. The best part is this Outer Space Treaty has a very stringent policy about let's not pollute space, and they mean that not only in don't leave your junk all over the place because it makes astronomers' lives a nightmare, but also like don't shit on the porch, right? Because you could infect a planet with life. Well, turns around, the Israeli team was like, fuck it, we want life on another planet. And so they were like, what can we put in our lander? And then they hit on tardigrades. Now, tardigrades, if you don't know, are sometimes called water bears. They're these microscopic life forms. They're one of the oldest forms of life on the planet that's still kicking around. They're fucking invincible. These things, you can freeze them and for centuries, and then they'll come up and they'll be alive still. They live on very little. They survive extreme pressure. They survive all kinds of things. In fact, there was a previous experiment at the, I believe it was the International Space Station, where they actually exposed tardigrades to dehydrated to hard vacuum and hydrated, and they exposed them to cosmic rays, and the fuckers survived. There were fatalities, and cosmic rays were actually the biggest factor in the fatality rate. But they came back to Earth and they survived. And yeah, these things make cockroaches look like prissy little fucks. They're insane. And what the SpaceIL team did to even include their increase their survival rate and to be a bit more sneaky, because I'm not even going to make that joke. They put tardigrades in the epoxy resin and gave them a suspension. And so lander crashes into the moon, and now there's life on the moon. And pretty much every scientist agree there is a chance that they survived, especially because of the epoxy resin, and that if rehydrated, spoiler alert, moon has water, the tardigrades could survive on the moon for quite some time. We don't know how long because food and other things, but tardigrades can go very long times without food. But yeah, it's no longer a question if there's life outside of Earth. We now know there's life outside of Earth because we fucking put it there. And that's just, first of all, they weren't punished, which, considering they weren't punished and America's militarizing space, it looks like that space treaty is just falling to pieces. But it just fascinated me that there's life on the fucking moon. I mean, yeah, we put it there. And yeah, it was all, it's little microscopic water bears. But how motherfucking irresponsible it is, but also how cool it is. It's like, it's hard to be upset, but I'm upset because they broke treaties, and reckless science like that is how we get all of our really horrific science fiction stories. But they put life on the motherfucking moon. And it's this kind of weird concept. I got really, really excited about it. I went on a whole little Google read about it, and because obviously we're talking about sending specimens to Mars for terraforming and such, and we've spoken about, like on the ISS there's hydroponics, and obviously there's people and everything, but the ISS is it hugs it. I mean, relatively speaking, it's pretty damn close to Earth. It's a lot closer than the moon. So to give you an idea, the distance, so you've got distance to ISS is 408 kilometers, but the distance to the moon is 384,000. So, it's a factor of 6,000. You multiply by 6,000 the distance to the moon. So the ISS is hugging us, and then the moon is up there. So, there's a big quantity difference there. It's like one of those things that's kind of hilarious when people are like, yeah, because I think a lot of people conceptualize the moon is a lot closer and the ISS is a lot further away, or rather, like if you ask most people to draw a line between 0 and 1 and sort of place the ISS on that line, I think a lot of people put it a lot closer to the middle than, pretty much right at the end on the Earth end. But yeah, so we now have life on the moon, these little fucking water bears, and they're tough, and I'm sure we will be responsible about it, and I'm sure as we start our moon base efforts and as Gateway gets kicking off and whatever, scientists will recover or quarantine the site, or will be aware of it. But it's amazing how often we lose records, and it's amazing how often there is just confusion about these things. I could totally see situations where we're on the moon in 100 years, or we're on the moon in 200 years, or whatever. These fucking tardigrades we're totally forgotten about, and they get exposed or whatever. And I don't know. I mean, I suppose I don't believe there's any tardigrade illnesses or like cross-speed. Like, I believe they're relatively harmless, and they haven't evolved in quite some time. But then again, on the moon, they'll be exposed to a lot of cosmic rays, even in epoxy, which will lower their survival, but will also drastically increase their mutation rate. So there it is. Life on the moon. I know. It's such a small thing, and it's not normally the kind of thing I'll talk about, but I wanted to give it a bit of attention because it had slipped me by, and I generally follow a bunch of the science news, and I'd heard about the Israeli the Israeli lander crashing, because that was back in April, but the tardigrade incident didn't come out immediately. It came out shortly after that, and so I think because I filter through the news and I was like, oh, more stories about the Israeli lander or whatever, my brain was like, yeah, no, I read that news. So yeah, a little bit of strangeness for you from 2019. I'm going to end it there because I don't think there's much, unless chat has anything, I don't think there's much more to say on the topic. We could speculate, but I don't feel like I'm expert enough to speculate past where the depth I've gone, really. But I just wanted to bring that from me to you. I've got a little bit of a tickle in my throat and coming down with something maybe. So a shorter show is in my interest as well. So for those of you on YouTube, this is a live show we do on Twitch. Always come around. We talk about tech stuff. We talk about game development, books, games, and occasionally weird topics like this, because I'm interested in weird topics and I follow my interests. So yeah, come join us on the stream. Ta-ta for now.